What's up, guys? Here to talk about another book. The book is Will Durant. Let me see if I can get it in the photo. Will Durant, The Greatest Minds and Ideas of All Time. And I'm going to rattle off the list of the 10 greatest thinkers that he had. I'm not going to talk about the 10 greatest poets. But, sorry, I heard my dogs walking around. What he gets at is, in this life, you got to understand that the people who lived before you live their ideas and everything, all the geniuses that have lived in this life, they live for you. And through the shameless worship of heroes with an open mind, you can learn to be like them. And you can take their ideas and use them for your own gain. And I'm going to read a little excerpt of this just so you can understand what I'm getting at. Of the many ideals which in youth gave life a meaning and radiance missing from the chilly perspective of middle age, one at least has remained with me as bright and satisfying as ever before, the shameless worship of heroes. In an age that would level everything and reverence nothing, I take my stand with Victorian Carlyle and light my candles like Mirandola before, in Plato's image, at the shrines of great men. I say shameless, for I know how unfashionable it is now to acknowledge in life or history any genius loftier than ourselves. And I'm going to stop for just 1 second and say that we have a tendency to just point out flaws. We can't just acknowledge genius when we see it. I'll give you an example. Not to say Arnold Schwarzenegger's a genius, but he did something right. He was able to become a millionaire just lifting weights back in the 70s. I mean, pumping iron was success, but he just lifted weights. And look what he became a movie star. And he just set the goals for himself. But in this life, you got to find mentors, and you got to find people you look up to. And you can't just point out flaws. You got to say, that is genius. That is smart. You got to acknowledge that somebody is loftier than yourself, smarter than you. And when you acknowledge that, you have an opportunity to learn. Let's see, where was I at? Our democratic dogma has leveled not only all voters, but all leaders. We delight to show that living geniuses are only mediocrities, and that dead ones are myths. If we may believe historian H.G. Wells, Caesar was a numbskull and Napoleon a fool. Since it is contrary to good manners to exalt ourselves, we achieve the same result by slyly indicating how inferior are the great men of the earth. In some of us, perhaps, it is a noble and merciless asceticism which would root out of our hearts the last vestige of worship and adoration, lest the old God should return and terrify us again. For my part, I cling to this final region and discover it in a content and stimulus more lasting than came from my devotional ecstasies of youth. How natural it seemed to greet the great Indian poet Rabindranath Tagore by that title. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Which so long had been given him by his countrymen. For why should we stand reverent before waterfalls and mountain tops, or a summer moon on a quiet sea, and not before the highest miracle of all, a man who was both great and good? So many of us are mere talents, clever children in the play of life, that when genius stands in our presence, we can only bow down before it as if it is an act of God, a continuance of creation. Such men are the very lifeblood of history, to which politics and industry are but frame and bones. Part cause of the dry scholasticism from which we were suffering when James Henry Robinson summoned us to humanize our knowledge was a conception of history as an impersonal flow of figures and facts, in which genius played so essential a role that histories prided themselves upon ignoring them. It was Karl Marx, above all, that his theory of history was due. It was bound up with a view of life that was distrusted the exceptional man, envied superior talent, and exalted the humble as the inheritors of the earth. In the end, men begin to write history as if it had never been lived at all, as if no drama had ever walked through it, no comedies or tragedies of struggling or frustrated men. The vivid narratives of Gibbon and Taine gave way to ash heaps of irrelevant erudition in which every fact was correct, documented, and dead. No, the real history of man is not in prices and wages, nor in relations and battles, nor in even tenure of common man. It is the lasting contributions made by geniuses to the sum of human civilization and nature and culture. The history of France is not, if one may say it with all courtesy, the history of the French people, the history of those nameless men and women who tilled the soil, cobbled the shoes, cut the cloth, and peddled the goods, for these things have been done everywhere and always. The history of France is a record of exceptional men, her geniuses, the ones who contributed the most, the ones who gave you the light bulb, which obviously was Thomas Edison in America, but I'm just saying those kind of inventions, that's the history. You don't say the guy who cleaned up trash out back of that restaurant was the one who set uh, the historical record, the one who really matters. Her inventors, scientists, statesmen, poets, artists, musicians, philosophers, and saints, and the additions which they made to the technology and wisdom, the artistry and decency of their people and mankind. And so with every country, so with the world, its history is properly the history of its great men and women. What are the rest of us but wheeling brick and mortar in their hands, that they may take a race a little finer than ourselves, that they may make a race a little finer than ourselves. Therefore I see history not as a dreary scene of politics and carnage, but as a struggle of man through genius, with the obdurate inertia of matter and the baffling mystery of mind, the struggle to understand, control, and remake himself and the world. I see men standing on the edge of knowledge and holding the light a little farther ahead, men carving marble into forms ennobling men, men molding peoples into better instruments of greatness, men taking the language of music and music out of language, men dreaming finer lives and living them. Here is a process of creation more vivid than any myth, a godliness more real than any creed. To contemplate such men, to insinuate ourselves through study into some modest discipleship to them, to watch them at their work and warm ourselves at the fire that consumes them and what makes them great. This is to recapture some of the thrill that youth gave us when we thought, at the altar or in the confessional, that we were touching or hearing God. In that dreamy youth we believed that life was evil and that only death could usher us into paradise. We were wrong. Even now, while we live, we may enter it. Every great book, every work of revealing art, every record of a devoted life is a call, and an open sesame, not sesame, it might be sesame, to the Elysian fields. Too soon we extinguish the flame of our hope and our reverence. Let us change the icons and light the candles again. Now, I'm probably not going to get into the 10 thinkers of all time, but let's just say, actually, I'll just tell you them real fast. And he did them in chronological order of which they lived. Let's see, Confucius, Plato, Aristotle, St. Thomas Aquinas, Copernicus, Nicholas Copernicus, Sir Francis Bacon, Sir Isaac Newton, genius, Voltaire. And Voltaire had a quote that someone asked him why he chose to be happy, and he said, "I choose to be happy because it's good for my health." It's a good quote. Immanuel Kant, and Kant has a theory. It's Kantian fairness, and it's why do people not pass in line? Why do people not jump in line? It's Kantian fairness. So next time somebody skips you, realize that there are no set rules. That's just Kantian fairness. You have to do something about it and actually speak to them if you want them to go to the back of the line. They're not just going to do it because they've cheated. They don't agree with Kantian fairness. So just think about that next time. And Charles Darwin, the 10th. Actually, one can make an argument that Charles Darwin might be the best, even though he was not the smartest man. He used the ideas and the stimulation of life and past ideas to figure out what he figured out and figure out evolution, which some people today still do not believe. Well, they say either 30 to 40% of Americans don't believe that, which is crazy. By the way, I mean, you can look at natural selection and see that like deer in Canada have the huge antlers because it's a sexual selection kind of thing. I mean, that's pretty obvious of evolution. It's been going on for millions of years, brother. It wasn't 6,000 years ago that all this started going on. But you believe what you want to believe. I do believe in that. I believe people can believe whatever they want to believe. But science does offer us some rendition of the truth, and we should seek it out. But that is in general what I want to talk about with this book. You've got to understand that intellects of the past are at your disposal, man. You got to be able to read their books and stuff like that and learn their ideas. The power of the human mind is crazy, man. But you got to use it. You got to be motivated to use it. So y'all have a good one. And I enjoy you watching. Rate, comment, subscribe. I'll tell you what, write a comment down and tell me who your favorite thinker was, or your favorite hero, who your favorite person is to learn from. Put a comment down below and tell me who that is and why. Thank you.